And joining us now from London is former Deputy British Prime Minister John Prescott. Thanks for being there.
Thank you.
What impact could the public revulsion over the Millie Dowler phone hacking scandal and everything that's flowing from it have on Rupert Murdoch's plans to expand his media empire in Britain?
Well, to my mind, he's not a fit and proper person to be able to extend his media to take over B-Sky B. Look, you've got to remember when this started, I've been trying for 2 years to get the police to admit that they were tapping my phone and taking messages from it. They denied it constantly. So did the Murdoch press, and so did the Press Council and the Crown Prosecution. What I did try to do was then to get the judicial review by the courts, who then revealed that there was a lot of evidence available, and in my case, my phone had been hacked into 44 times. They just told a lie. Now we've got another inquiry by the police, which is now beginning to bring out these terrible events of which they've been involved in. And it all involves, at the moment, Murdoch Press. Now, the government says we are considering giving them B-Sky B, and we only consider that on plurality. Well, even on plurality, they control most of the damn media system here, but they should do it on privacy, and we're trying to push them now into examining the criminal acts by Murdoch. This is not a man or an organisation fit for purpose to carry out such an operation.
Yes, when you say that Murdoch himself, that is Rupert Murdoch, is not a fit and proper person, and you talk about criminal acts by Murdoch, that's a rush to judgment, isn't it? Because we don't know yet whether he had any idea what was going on in the lower levels of his organisation.
Well, that's not Rupert Murdoch, is it? But let me look. He's publicly apologised and has been paying out an awful lot of money to actually deal with civil cases. And if I would give you one example, he's admitted that criminal acts were done with the latest settlement with Sienna Miller, one of our celebrities here. And she got a settlement, but in the settlement in the court, the Murdoch press said, we won't tell you everything in this civil case what we've done, but we'll tell you privately. They are desperate to see what they've done doesn't come out into open court, and that's why I've been taking an action against the police to examine exactly what was going on and this close relationship between the police, who they've now admitted they've been paying. My God, why wasn't all this information out before, a couple of years ago? It's all been there. It's true that Murdoch came in and probably pushed them to say we've got to admit to some of this, but I can't believe for a moment, given all the scandal involved in even tapping the phones of the royals here, that Mr. Murdoch didn't know what was going on. But he is answerable. The trouble is with the Murdoch Corporation, they all say, not me, Gov, not me, Gov. Well, who the hell was signing the cheques and signing these people on?
Are you suggesting that the moral, if not the legal, culpability goes all the way to the top?
Well, I believe they're responsible for the organisation. There's no doubt about that. And if you look at the two orders, one of them is now Chief Executive, Rebecca Wade, along with Coulson, who became the Director of Communications for Mr. Cameron, the Prime Minister. What we find now is that he resigned, Coulson, on the argument that it was my watch. Well, it was certainly Rebecca Wade's watch. She was the editor, not the deputy as he was. So I believe she should go. I think it's only a matter of time before she does. But it's being put out that she's Murdoch's favourite child and he'll keep her. Well, we'll have to wait and see. I'm more concerned that he doesn't get access to B-Sky, turning it into kind of Fox News and adopting the same kind of culture he's adopted in his paper coming in B-Sky News.
I'll come to that in a minute, but since you've mentioned her, Rebecca Brooks is how we know of her. She's also, previously she was Rebecca Wade, wasn't she?
Previous marriage at Wade, yeah.
That's right. Now, she was the editor of the News of the World during the Millie Dowler hacking. She's claiming publicly she knew nothing about this. Should she
Every one of them says that.
Well, no, just hang on for 1 second. Should she be publicly cross-examined in an open inquiry about this?
Well, I think she should be, but she's refused to appear before the Select Committee in the House of Commons when they've asked her to come and appear. The one appearance she did do, she admitted to paying the police. Now all the emails are coming out, apparently, and showing just how much who was paid with the police and paid by Murdoch Press. Look, all this thing started in 2006. We're now here in 2011, near 2012. And basically, it's only in the last 2 years they slowly have begun to release bits and bits of information. Not a completely transparency, bit by bit by bit. Now it's totally exposed with this terrible case of the young girl who was murdered, and which they were tapping her phone. Tapping, by the way, and taking the messages off in order to get some more messages, to get more stories, to sell to the news of the world. Who the hell was paying them and who was instructing them?
It seems that there may be many more cases like Millie Dowling as well. Millie Dowler. I mean, the hacking of the phones of the families of other missing or murdered children. Plus, it now appears, the hacking of the phones of the families of victims of the London bombings.
Yeah, I mean, it's so terrible. I mean, this is taking it on a while from the 2/6 when you come to the bombing, etc. But what we're now beginning to find is that all this evidence was available to the first inquiry. They didn't bother to look into it for one reason or another. The Crown prosecution agreed with them that it was only a rogue reporter. So did the Press Council here, who's supposed to be governing some kind of accountability. That turned out to be a lie. And now you've got the Press Complaints Commissioner saying, I was lied to by the News of the World. It's just utter contempt for the actual individuals involved and utter contempt for the law itself. And at the heart of this is the big issue. What is the balance between the right to publish things for public interest and the rights to maintain privacy? The press want free hand for public, and as we've seen in this case, they don't care a damn who they damage in that progress. And I might say, usually they identified in the early stages, well, it's only politicians and celebrities. Well, even they're entitled not to have their phone hacked, but now this has been a moment of tide change, no doubt about it. Utter deplorable action.
Are you alleging, just going back to what you were saying at the beginning of that statement, are you alleging that there was a cover-up of the original investigation?
Well, I think the Prime Minister admitted today that something went wrong with the first inquiry, which basically did an inquiry, said that there was no further evidence, said to me there was no connection or evidence of my phone being tapped into. This was just wrong. And it took the Metropolitan Police to come to me and apologise. And that was only after, and to admit there were 44 times, and that was only after that I went to the courts to get a judicial review. Of course something was wrong with the first inquiry. Even the Prime Minister's recognised that. It was a cover-up to my mind. They didn't do a proper investigation. The police didn't carry out its role, and it was to the advantage of News International.
All right, David Cameron has reversed his position now on the inquiry. He now says there should be a public inquiry. There's going to be a parliamentary debate about this in London today. What form...
It's on now, I think, yeah.
Yeah, what form should an inquiry take, assuming there is one, and there may be more than one, in fact?
Well, but he's also saying it can't be done until the criminal inquiries are finished. That's what he says. That was his first position. That would be many years ahead. There's no doubt about that. Not only the assessing information and going to the courts and all that will be years away. You really can't wait until see what's happened to this relationship between the press and the police and the breaching of the human rights of individuals. I believe, I'm not sure about this, but I'm going to check it out. I've just been told by a lawyer, a very famous lawyer, that, you know, it's in the Act of 2005, it allows you to do an investigation even while criminal investigations are underway. I'm going to check that out. We can't wait years and years, though. I noticed when he was pushed, the Prime Minister said, perhaps we could start bit by bit. The name of the game is to manage the news and take as long as possible and get out of the heat. We shouldn't allow them to get away with it.
Let's look then at the B-Sky B deal, with this massive £8 billion deal where Murdoch will take over the whole of this network. This decision is actually pending. It's supposed to happen sometime in the next week or so, as far as I understand it. As you pointed out, that it's in the hands of the Culture Secretary, Jeremy Hunt. He's not allowed, according to his remit, to use the fit and proper test to make that decision.
what he's doing is look at how the business of dominating our press, the proportion and competition. He's examined that and says, I have to make a judgment on that. For months I've been saying, are you saying you're prepared to pass over the control of B-Sky B, total control, to the Murdoch Corporation, the News International, without taking into account all these criminal acts that have been committed by them? Now, I've looked at the regulators list, and one of the obligations of the regulator, called Ofcom, is to investigate any problems concerning the invasion of privacy. Well, it's been doing that on a massive scale. So to offer the possibility without considering from Ofcom their advice, I've written to Mr. Hunt to say, will you delay any decision in giving a B-Sky deal, which could presumably come on the ending of the second consultation, which in fact is the 8th of July, he can hold back. I think there would be an outrage if he gave the permission for Murdoch now to purchase B-Sky B when all these hands are full of such criminal activities by people in his companies, not just rogue journalists. The chief executive, Reckabade, is a chief executive Murdoch. That culture's there. You've got to take it out.
We've seen a flight of advertisers from the News of the World, although much of that advertising is going to other News International operations anyway, so it's still going effectively to Rupert Murdoch. But I'm wondering, do you see in this the beginning of the end of Rupert Murdoch's huge influence over British politics?
Well, his influence has been over British politicians of all political parties who believe he can decide who wins the next election. I don't think the evidence is in that, and that's not a new line for Murdoch, is it? Whatever country he operates in, he does that all the time. I think it's not unknown in Australia. But leaving that aside, what he has done has now laid down a position that he thinks will be one that will be totally accepted. What's happened with these terrible incidents now is the public have got angry. They didn't mind in a way when it seemed to be just celebrities. This has really got to people feeling really bad about it. Now, the advertisers have indicated they don't want to be with the News of the World. Well, we have to see what happens with that. There is a campaign going on about saying to people, don't buy the News of the World. That's another thing that people can be involved in. And on the Twitter, there's 70,000 demanding this shouldn't go to Murdoch. But there was an example not so long ago of another Murdoch operation, which was the paper called The Sun. And they actually said some terrible things about a terrible football tragedy here in Sheffield at Hillsborough. They had to apologise for it, but the people in Liverpool were so incensed, they put a boycott on it, and its sales went down dramatically. And I think what's also concerned people, The Sun, all the Murdoch press, and the Times only today has come out with a kind of editorial saying it's not right. But they've all been putting it on page 25, 5 lines. When you consider just how much time has been given to these scandalous stories, that's how much attention they've given to this biggest scandal of the British press. That's the Murdoch press.
We're talking about the influence of Rupert Murdoch. Of course, that influence was effectively granted to Rupert Murdoch by the Thatcher government originally, which allowed him to get these newspaper and other media controlling influences in the first place. So he backed them from election to election after that. Then he did the same for Tony Blair. So Tony Blair also relied very heavily on the support of the Murdoch empire. So I guess what I'm asking, can you imagine David Cameron giving up that kind of prize?
Well, first of all, there's a kind of myth that the Sun that won it, perpetuated by the Sun. They only backed Blair because it was obvious we were going to win, and they liked to be a winner. When it came Gordon Brown, they decided that he wasn't going to be the winner. They'd go for Cameron. But Cameron didn't get it, did he? They got a coalition, didn't win it outright, so the paper didn't influence it that way. They think they play a part, and I think all too often some of the politicians think, therefore they make that, and that's unfortunate. And the relationship between politicians and Murdoch has been an unhealthy one to my mind, but it has been there, it's been part of the past culture.
On both sides, you're saying, on both sides of politics?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think I was the only one in my own Labour government I used to say to Gordon Brown and to Tony Blair, look, for God's sake, why do you keep going to Murdoch? And Murdoch, of course, brings in all these editors, and it's happened again in the last few weeks, when Murdoch brought all his editors into one of his big conferences, Cameron addresses them, and Miliband of Labour is asked to address them. Well, you've asked to said you want to talk to 92 editors, and I can see why they think that, but do those 92 editors do what Murdoch tells them? Of course they do.